The morning my son-in-law stood on my front lawn in Oakville, Ontario, holding a folder of legal papers and grinning like he'd already won, I was still in my robe, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold. He brought someone with him, a man in a gray suit who introduced himself as a representative from a law firm I'd never heard of. Beside them, at the curb, sat my daughter. She didn't get out of the car. She didn't even look up. The man in the gray suit handed me a document. My son-in-law crossed his arms and said, loud enough for the Hendersons next door to hear through their open kitchen window, "This is just how it has to go, Hugh. The business is ours now. Easier if you accept it." I looked at the document. Then I looked at my son-in-law. Then I said very quietly, "Who authorized this transfer?" His smile didn't waver, but something behind his eyes did. "My name is Hugh Callahan. I'm 64 years old, and for 31 years I ran a small but profitable commercial accounting firm out of Oakville. I built it from nothing. One rented office above a dry cleaner on Lakeshore Road, one second-hand desk, one client who was a cousin's friend and needed help with his contracting taxes. By the time I retired 2 years ago, Callahan Financial had 11 employees, a client base of over 200 small businesses across Halton region, and an office building I owned outright on Kerr Street. I am not a dramatic man. I don't tell stories at dinner parties. I spent my whole career in the quiet discipline of numbers, of ledgers that don't lie, of paper trails that always lead somewhere. That's what people don't understand about accountants. We are very patient. We notice everything. We wait. My daughter is the kind of child who made everything feel purposeful. She used to sit across from me at the kitchen table while I worked weekend files doing her homework, not asking for attention, just wanting to be near. When she was 14, she told me she wanted to study business. I remember feeling something swell in my chest that I didn't quite have words for. Pride, yes, but also recognition, like I was seeing myself in a version the world had made better. She did study business. She graduated from McMaster with honors. She was sharp, organized, precise. Everything I'd hoped. Then she met my son-in-law at a conference in Toronto 3 years ago, and something in her began to shift so gradually, I almost didn't notice until it was already done. He had a quality I've seen in a certain kind of client over the years, the ones who come in with big numbers and bigger confidence and no paper to back either up. He talked about real estate development, about investment opportunities, about connections he had in the Alberta energy sector. He drove a leased BMW he referred to as the temporary one, while the other one was being serviced. He had opinions about everything and expertise in nothing I could verify. My daughter seemed happy, so I kept my mouth shut. That was my first mistake. My second mistake was letting him come to the firm's transition meetings. When I decided to retire, I had every intention of selling Callahan Financial to a junior partner, a woman named Rebecca who'd been with me for 9 years and knew every client file by heart. The deal was nearly finalized. Then my daughter came to me one Sunday in February, sat at that same kitchen table, and said she'd like to be involved in the business, that she and her husband had a plan, that it would keep things in the family. I should have asked more questions. Instead, I thought about the 14-year-old doing homework across from me, and I said yes. Over the following 4 months, she visited the office regularly. I introduced her to staff. I walked her through client files, billing systems, the lease on the Kerr Street building. I let her sit in on renewal meetings with our biggest accounts. My son-in-law came twice, asked questions about asset valuation and building equity. I thought he was being diligent. He was mapping everything out. The documents started in April. My daughter brought papers to the house on a Thursday evening, transition paperwork, she said, for transferring operational control while we negotiated terms. Her husband had a lawyer, she said, who'd drawn everything up properly. I poured us both tea. I looked at the headers on the forms. They looked right. I signed where she pointed. I signed 3 more sets of papers over the following 6 weeks. I thought I was signing a management agreement, a consulting arrangement, a preliminary letter of intent. I was not paying close enough attention. I know that now. I know exactly why. She was my daughter. The morning everything came apart was a Thursday in late September. I'd driven to the Kerr Street office to pick up some archive files I needed from my own tax records. Rebecca met me in the lobby, and the expression on her face stopped me before I reached the elevator. "Hugh," she said carefully, "I need you to see something." She showed me a letter on Callahan Financial letterhead, my logo, addressed to 3 of our longest-standing corporate clients. It informed them that ownership of the firm had transferred to a numbered company registered in Alberta, effective the 1st of October. It was signed by my son-in-law as managing director. I read it twice. I said, "When did this go out?" "This morning," Rebecca said. "And he's already been in contact with the bank. The business account has a new signing authority." I drove home. I sat in my car in the driveway for a few minutes, very still, doing what I've always done when something important requires thinking. I let the numbers line up in my head. What I'd signed, what I remembered, what I hadn't read carefully enough, what, if anything, I had copies of. I had copies of everything. 31 years of running a firm had made me compulsively organized. Every document that had ever crossed my desk, personal or professional, was scanned and backed up on an external hard drive I kept in a fireproof safe in my home office, including everything my daughter had brought me to sign. That afternoon, I called a lawyer I'd known for years, a woman who'd handled the firm's incorporation back when I first started. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Hugh, I need you to bring me those copies tomorrow morning. All of them." Her name was Patricia Sloan, and she'd been practicing corporate and estates law in Burlington for over 25 years. When I arrived at her office the next morning, she had already done preliminary research on the numbered Alberta company. It was registered 6 months ago. My son-in-law was listed as sole director. My daughter was listed as secretary. Patricia spread the documents I'd brought across her desk and read through them with the focused quiet of someone who already suspected what she was going to find. Twice she stopped and made a note. Once she picked up one page and held it next to another and didn't say anything for a long moment. "Hugh," she said finally, "do you remember signing a document that included a clause about irrevocable transfer of business assets?" I thought about it. No. One of these pages contains that clause. It's on page 4 of what presents itself as a standard management agreement. The first 3 pages are exactly what you'd expect. Page 4 is not. She turned the document around so I could see. The clause was written in the same font, the same size, buried in a subsection about operational continuity. I'd signed at the bottom of page 4. My signature sat directly beneath language I had never intended to agree to. "This is what's called a document switch," Patricia said. "Technically, your signature is there, but the question is whether you understood what you were signing and whether the presentation of this document constituted fraud." She referred me to a forensic document examiner to look at the other papers as well. She also recommended I contact the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, because my son-in-law had been using my professional credentials in correspondence with clients without my authorization. I drove home past the Tim Hortons on the corner where my daughter and I used to stop Saturday mornings when she was small. She always ordered a hot chocolate and a Timbit, and she'd carry them both very carefully to the table like she was transporting something precious. I hadn't thought about that in years. I thought about it for a long time that afternoon. The forensic examiner's report came back within the week. 2 of the documents I'd signed had pages that didn't match. Different paper stock, subtle variation in margin width. Someone had prepared the original documents, had me sign the legitimate pages, and then inserted replacement pages afterward. It was careful work. It wasn't careful enough. Meanwhile, Patricia had discovered something else. My son-in-law had approached two of Callahan Financial's largest clients before the letter went out, a property management company in Mississauga and a dental group with 6 locations across Hamilton. He'd met with them privately and told them the firm was under new ownership and that their existing contracts would be honored under different terms. He was, in effect, already selling something that wasn't his. The property management company had called him back. The dental group had not, and had quietly begun looking for a new accountant. Rebecca told me this when I called her. She also told me she'd been asked to sign a new employment contract with the Alberta company and had refused. I didn't think it was right, she said. Something felt off from the beginning when he started coming in. I asked her to document every interaction she'd had with him. She already had. Patricia filed the civil claim on a Monday. Fraud, misrepresentation, unauthorized use of professional credentials, attempted conversion of business assets. She also contacted the Law Society and the CPA Ontario regulatory body. Both opened investigations. That evening, my daughter called me. I answered. "Dad," she said. Her voice was tight the way it got when she was trying to control something. "We need to talk about this before it goes further. You're making a mistake." "Tell me," I said, "what I signed." Silence. "Tell me what was on page 4 of the management agreement, sweetheart. Tell me what I agreed to." More silence. Then, "It was standard language, standard transition language. You're misreading it." "I had a forensic examiner look at those pages," I said. "The paper stock on page 4 doesn't match the rest of the document. Do you want to tell me how that happened?" The silence after that was different, longer. "He said it would work," she finally said, and her voice had changed completely. The control stripped out of it, something raw underneath. "He said you'd never check. He said you trusted me." I sat with that for a moment. "I did trust you," I said. "I still do in the ways that matter, but I can't help you avoid what happens next. You know that." She started crying, real crying. The kind I hadn't heard since she was a teenager and her cat died. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened and didn't hang up. "He told me it was just restructuring," she said between breaths. "He said we pay you out properly once the business was generating. He had projections. He had a whole plan." "Has he ever shown you his bank statements?" I asked. She didn't answer. "Has he ever shown you the actual financials on any of his projects? The Alberta energy contacts? The real estate developments?" Still nothing. "I'm going to send you something," I said. "I want you to look at it and call me back." I sent her the summary report Patricia had compiled on my son-in-law's financial background. Public records, court filings, corporate registry searches. He had incorporated and dissolved 6 companies in 4 provinces over 8 years. 2 had been named in small claims actions. 1 had been subject to a CRA audit that resulted in a reassessment and penalties. None had ever employed more than 2 people. None had produced any verifiable revenue. She called back 40 minutes later. "I didn't know," she said. "I believe you," I said, "but that doesn't change what was done." The main hearing was held at the Ontario Superior Court of Justice in Milton. Patricia had built the case methodically: the forensic document analysis, the paper stock discrepancy, the testimony from Rebecca about unauthorized representations made to clients, correspondence showing my son-in-law had used my CPA designation in emails to 2 institutional contacts without permission. My son-in-law had hired a lawyer who specialized in commercial litigation and came into the courtroom projecting the confidence of someone who'd done this before. He made an early attempt at settlement the morning of the hearing, through his counsel, offering to return operational control in exchange for dropping all claims and agreeing not to pursue any further regulatory complaints. Patricia looked at me. I shook my head. The judge was a quiet, methodical woman who had clearly read every page submitted in advance. She asked precise questions. She did not seem impressed by the argument that I had signed the documents voluntarily and should have read them more carefully. particularly after Patricia introduced the forensic evidence and the paper stock analysis. When the ruling came, it was clear. The asset transfer documents were declared void. The numbered Alberta company had no valid claim on Callahan Financial or the Kerr Street property. All client correspondence sent under my son-in-law's unauthorized signature was to be formally retracted. He was ordered to pay costs. The CPA Ontario investigation concluded 3 months later. Using a designate's credentials without authorization for commercial purposes carries serious consequences in this province. He was prohibited from representing himself as affiliated with any CPA-registered firm for 5 years and fined accordingly. The Law Society matter involving his lawyer, who had apparently reviewed the documents and said nothing, was still ongoing at that point. My daughter had cooperated with the investigation. She provided correspondence, meeting notes, her own account of what she'd been told and what she'd understood. The judge noted her cooperation in the ruling. There were no criminal charges against her, though the Crown had reviewed the file. My son-in-law faced separate proceedings through the CRA, which had been quietly notified about his business practices across multiple provinces. The last time I saw him was outside the courthouse in Milton. He walked past me without stopping. He looked smaller than I remembered. I sold Callahan Financial to Rebecca in November. The terms we'd originally negotiated, adjusted slightly for the disruption of the past year. She deserved it. She'd kept the staff together and the clients reassured through the whole ordeal, mostly through the simple act of showing up every morning and doing the work. The Kerr Street building I kept for now. I'm renting it to a physiotherapy practice. The income is modest and the tenants pay on time, which is all you can really ask. My daughter and her moved back to Oakville in the spring. Not with me. She has an apartment near the waterfront. We have lunch on Sundays sometimes. It's careful the way things are when they've been broken and you're both trying to figure out which parts can be set again and which ones have changed shape permanently. We don't talk about him. We talk about her. What she wants to do next, who she wants to be without the architecture he built around her. She's sharp. She always was. I think she's going to be all right. I started volunteering 2 mornings a week with a seniors financial literacy program run through the Oakville Public Library. It began as something to do with the time. It became something I actually think about between sessions. The people who come in. Retired teachers, widows managing estates for the first time, men my age who handed the finances to a spouse for 40 years and are now suddenly alone with a T4 and no idea what to do. They're not foolish, they're just trusting. They extended that trust in the direction of people who should have honored it, and some of those people didn't. I know something about that. One Tuesday morning, a man came in who reminded me of myself, early 60s, careful with his words, clearly used to being competent, and uncomfortable with needing help. His daughter had been handling his investments for 2 years. He'd signed papers he hadn't fully read. He was starting to notice things that didn't add up. I sat across from him and I said, "Tell me everything. Start at the beginning. Leave nothing out." He talked for an hour. I listened to all of it. Then I walked him through exactly what to do next, step by step, in plain language, without drama. Because that's what you do when you've been through it yourself and come out the other side with the numbers still intact and the house still yours and some version of the life you built still standing. You pay attention to the details. You wait. And then you act, carefully, completely, and without hesitation, because the truth always leaves a paper trail, and paper trails always lead somewhere, and somewhere is exactly where you need to go. I think about that Tim Hortons on the corner a lot more than I expected to. Not in a sentimental way, exactly. More the way you think about a detail that turned out to mean something you didn't understand at the time. My daughter, small, carrying a hot chocolate and a Timbit to the table like she was transporting something precious. That image kept surfacing all through the legal proceedings, through the forensic reports in the courtroom, and the day I watched my son-in-law walk past me outside the courthouse without stopping. It still surfaces now. I've spent a lot of time since then thinking about how things go wrong slowly, not all at once. Not with a dramatic moment you can point to. They go wrong in small increments, in documents you don't read carefully enough, in trust you extend because the person across the table is someone you love, in questions you don't ask because asking them feels like an accusation. I trusted my daughter. I should have trusted the paperwork too. Those aren't contradictory things. I understand that now in a way I didn't before. What I also understand, and this is the part I try to pass on when I'm sitting across from someone at the library on a Tuesday morning, is that what saved me wasn't anger, and it wasn't luck. It was 31 years of a habit I'd never thought of as protection. I kept everything. I filed everything. I built a professional life on the principle that numbers don't lie and paper trails don't disappear. That wasn't strategy in the moment. That was just who I'd always been. And it turned out that who you've always been is exactly what you have to fall back on when someone tries to take everything else. There's something clarifying about being tested that way. You find out fast what's actually solid in you. Rebecca knew something was wrong before I did and refused to sign a contract that wasn't right because her integrity was not for sale even when her job might have been on the line. Patricia Sloan read 4 pages of documents and found the one line that mattered because she was thorough in the way that only people who genuinely care about doing things right ever are. The people who held to all of it did so because of who they were, not because of any calculation about what they get in return. My son-in-law had charisma and a plan and a lawyer and a numbered company in Alberta. What he didn't have was any of that, and in the end, that was the whole story. My daughter in a rebuilding. It's slow, the way real things usually are. She's figuring out who she is without the architecture someone else built around her. And I think she's going to find that the person underneath is worth keeping. She was always sharp. She was always careful. She just trusted the wrong person before she trusted herself. I know something about that too. I'm not sure I'll ever stop thinking about what it cost, not financially, but in the quieter way. The Sunday lunches that are careful now. The conversations that skirt around the edges of things we haven't fully said yet. That's a real loss, and I don't think it helps anyone to pretend otherwise. But here is what I keep coming back to. The truth left a paper trail. It always does. And the only reason I could follow it was because I'd spent a lifetime paying attention, staying honest, and not quitting when things got complicated. Those aren't dramatic qualities. They don't make for a good story in the moment. They just happen to be the only things that actually work.